So as far as achievements and accolades, we've had 2 world champions, Brian Bowles and Forrest Griffin. We're the only gym in Georgia to have even 1 world champion. We've been voted Gym of the Year many times, Coach of the Year many times. We've had 4 fighters on the Ultimate Fighter TV show. Many amateur champions, many pro champions, and we've had many of our students graduate and go on to some other awesome careers: military, police, doctors, lawyers. I think we've touched a lot of lives.
And then most recently, we won the Athens Banner Herald Reader's Choice Award for Best Martial Arts Studio for the year 2014.
All right, so the round 1, we got this is basically the background of you guys' history and gym and whatnot. So, what exactly led you into mixed martial arts growing up? What led you to the idea of mixed martial arts other than other sports?
Well, I guess it started when I was 11. Adam started teaching me martial arts. We just started, from there, started training martial arts. Basically, it hasn't stopped in some form or fashion. We've been doing something, wrestling in high school and things of that nature, taekwondo, karate, all the jeet kune do. We've done stick and knife fighting, just done a lot of things. And over the course of time and doing all those arts, we both sort of realized around the same time that things were missing, and we didn't like being stuck in sort of like a rule set. We had to do some things certain ways, and we found a boxing coach and a Muay Thai coach, and we were doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and doing all those things. We sort of just said one day, let's put it together and go fight. And in 2009, we actually both made our amateur debuts.
No. 2009?
Oh, in 1999.
Right. So 1993 is when the first UFC started. Roy and I were training karate together. And every Friday night they used to let us, even though we weren't black belts, they used to let us come spar with them. And we were basically just punching bags to them. And then the UFC comes out and we watch this small guy just beat up all these karate guys, all these bigger guys and stuff by what looked like wrestling at that point. We hadn't trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at that point, so it looked like wrestling. So the next time we went back, we're like, why don't we just tackle all these guys and beat them up on the ground, since we had both wrestled in high school. And I think the important thing about the UFC and seeing mixed martial arts start is it just clicked with us. It was just like, this is what we want to do. Like, we don't want to stand up and punch each other in the chest. We don't want to kick each other in the head. Like, we want to do everything. And it just sort of snowballed from there. And the fact that we are so close in age and demeanor and things like that, it was just a natural fit for us to do it together. And the problem was, in the mid-90s, when we were down here, no one was doing this kind of stuff. So if we wanted to do it, we had to teach other people how to do it, and then we could all do it together. And that's basically how we got into coaching and eventually, the gym that we have now.
So since it all led to the gym, give us a little quick history of when the gym started and how it led to what it is today.
So we started with a small group at the University of Georgia. That's probably 1998, 7. They gave us the wrestling room late. We had like late Tuesday night, late Sunday night, and people would just come through. And we were really working through the ideas of mixed martial arts and starting down the path. Sometimes we would fight in the elevator. Sometimes we would go train on top of the parking deck. Like, we were doing some really crazy stuff back then. Eventually we had a small group, and the university didn't really love what we were doing, so we moved into a very small warehouse right off of 441. And then, about every 3 or 4 years, we got bigger and we improved our facilities. We moved across the street and we doubled that location. Eventually we moved to this location. Now we've doubled this location. So it's just been a nice progression for us from very humble beginnings to what we have now.
So, like you guys said, how they didn't like what you're doing at the University of Georgia. How do you guys think the perception of MMA has changed over the years and it becoming way more mainstream? And do you think it's for the better?
The UFC and the perception of mixed martial arts has certainly gotten better over the years. Just think about the terminology that we use now. We're speaking about a company. It's like saying Xerox for making a copy of something. So people will actually talk about UFC fighting sort of interchangeably with mixed martial arts, where back in the day it was called no holds barred fighting, and it was no rules, and it they called it human, chicken fighting. I don't know if we can say that on the camera.
I think we say human cockfighting.
So human cockfighting, and and it's certainly moved far away from that. Now there are still people and there's still detractors and always will be because it's still a young sport, but it has definitely moved away from that thought process, that mentality, into something that's more mainstream, and it's a $1 billion industry that's spearheaded by the UFC, but there's fights all over the place now.
But it's still not legal everywhere. So like we're in Georgia, which is a hotbed of mixed martial arts. It's been a hotbed of mixed martial arts since the late 90s, and so we take for granted, but New York State, still illegal to have mixed martial arts fights. They vote on it all the time, and it keeps being turned down, even though fights at Madison Square Garden would be an amazing event. I mean, I would fly up there in a heartbeat. So even though the perception as a mainstream sport has definitely improved, there are still people that don't necessarily, they're not really educated on the sport, and they still see it as something negative.
So that's the main challenge of globalization, is kind of people's perception.
Well, globalization is happening regardless. The UFC has fought over the last couple of years in China, they're in Australia this weekend, South America. I mean, they've been everywhere. You fought what? You fought in Ireland?
I fought in Ireland, I fought in Japan, I fought obviously in Canada, well, it's North America, but Canada, United States, all up and down the East Coast.
There's a TUF show in Mexico right now.
South Africa.
Right, so I
South
mean, it's
Africa.
all over. So globalization is going to happen. There's more stigma maybe in America than there necessarily is outside of America.
Okay, and we also kind of talked about the concept of egoism in our book, and I noticed you wear that shirt, the no ego a lot. So what's kind of your approach to attitude when someone walks in through the door in the hardcore gym?
So we have an imaginary sign over the door, and it should be outside. It should be the sign before you enter that says, "Leave your ego at the door." And something that's always drawn me to mixed martial arts and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and things like that is, if you can't control your ego, you wash out of the sport very quickly. If you can't fully grasp the fact that there are days when you are just going to be the fly, and there are days when you're going to be the windshield, it's very difficult to survive doing this. Even if you're just a hobbyist, it's still something that you have to get over. If you're a pro, you gotta bury that day one. We've seen world-class wrestlers come into the room and after just one session go from a place where they're used to handling everyone to a place where they're getting handled, and some of those guys never come back and train anymore because their egos just can't take it. The mat is just a no BS zone. You can't fake being good at mixed martial arts any more than you can fake speaking Spanish. You immediately know it, and if you can't deal with that, then it's not a place where you can survive.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is in being able to be on a mat and accept defeat. Most people will come to the door, the normal people that come to the door, they don't have there's really no ego to it. People that have some training or saw a couple of UFCs and think that they've learned some stuff, you'll have them come in and again, like Adam was saying, they'll think a little bit too highly of themselves, and it checks you very quickly. Not even in a violent sense, because Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is as non-violent as anything you can do to someone. And in that, I think it can sometimes even make it worse. You see this skinny kid on a mat, he's small, he's unassuming, wherever he may be, and that's the guy who's beating up the big guy who just came in the room. And unless you can handle that defeat and handle, sometimes being a nail instead of a hammer, you can't handle being on that mat at all.
The other part is that I look at martial arts as a lifelong pursuit. And you have this beginner phase, and then you might have this phase where you're competing a lot, and then you have this phase where it's the rest of your life. And the rest of your life phase is the longest part of it. And you have to accept that when you're 35, your body won't do the things it did when you were 21. When you're 40, and if you want to stay involved in this the rest of your life, then you have to understand that it has to be about more than just being great. It has to be about other important things, and ego gets in the way of that.
All right, so round two is going to be